The crash broke my leg, but it was my mother who broke everything else. Lying in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling. I mistook her frantic energy for love. It was not until my grandfather, Frank, leaned in and asked a single, quiet question that I realized Marlene was not there to help me heal. She was there to strip me clean. I thought I was a daughter in a crisis, but to her, I was just an opportunity. Rain in Briar Glen always smelled like wet asphalt and old pine needles. It was a smell I usually associated with comfort, with the kind of weekends where you did not have to leave the house, but on this particular Tuesday, it smelled like exhaustion. I sat at my desk at the logistics office, watching the water streak down the plate glass window, blurring the headlights of the cars passing on Main Street into long, angry ribbons of red and white light. I was 33 years old, and my life was a series of carefully managed columns in a spreadsheet. Income in column A, fixed expenses in column B, savings in column C. There was no column for disaster. I worked hard to keep it that way. My job as a coordinator for a mid-sized regional shipping firm was not glamorous. It involved soothing angry truck drivers, tracking lost pallets of drywall, and staring at two monitors until my eyes felt like they were filled with sand. But it was steady. It paid the rent on my second-floor apartment. It covered the lease on my sedan, and it allowed me to put a small percentage away every month for a future I had not quite visualized yet. My phone buzzed on the desk. The screen lit up with the name Mother. I looked at it, feeling that familiar tightening in my chest, like a fist closing around my sternum. I let it go to voicemail. Marlene Hayes did not call to ask how my day was. She called when she needed an audience or a scapegoat, and I did not have the energy for either. I packed up my bag. My lower back ached from the cheap ergonomic chair that was neither cheap nor ergonomic. I needed to stop at the grocery store for milk and maybe a frozen pizza. I needed to call my grandfather. Frank. I tried to call him every other day. Unlike my mother, Frank was a creature of silence and substance. He lived in the same small, paid-off house he had shared with my grandmother for 40 years. He was stubborn, yes, and old-fashioned in ways that sometimes made me grind my teeth. But he was the only person in my family who looked at me and saw a person, not an extension of himself. I walked out to the parking lot, popping my umbrella open against the wind. The rain was coming down harder now, cold and biting. I got into my car, tossed my bag onto the passenger seat, and took a deep breath. Just 20 minutes, I told myself. 20 minutes, and I would be home. The drive was routine until it wasn't. I took the route that went under the old railway overpass. It was a notorious spot in Briar Glen, a dip in the road where water tended to pool during storms like this. The traffic was slow, a line of red taillights inching forward in the dark. I had my wipers on the highest setting, the rhythmic thwack-thwack serving as a metronome for my tired thoughts. I was stopped behind a blue pickup truck. Waiting for the light at the intersection ahead to turn green, I glanced in my rearview mirror. The headlights behind me were bright. Too bright. Usually, when a car approaches a line of stopped traffic, you see the nose dip. You see the intensity of the lights shift as the driver hits the brakes. It is a subtle language of the road that we all learn instinctively. I watched the lights grow larger. They were not dipping. My brain registered the data, but my body could not process the implication fast enough. The car behind me was coming in hot, and it was not slowing down. There was no screech of tires. There was no desperate swerve. There was just the blinding white expansion of high beams filling my mirror, consuming my world. I had time to think one coherent thought. They are not stopping. The impact sounded like the world snapping in half. Metal screamed against metal. A sound so high-pitched it felt like a needle in my ear. My head snapped back against the headrest, then forward. My car was shoved violently into the pickup truck ahead of me, the airbag deployed with a punch of hot dust and chemical smell. Slamming into my face, my knees smashed into the dashboard. For a moment, there was silence. Just the hissing of the radiator and the sound of the rain drumming on the roof, which was now crumpled in a way it should not be. Then the pain arrived. It started in my right leg, a hot, searing agony that felt less like an injury and more like someone had set my bone on fire. My vision swam. I tried to reach for the door handle, but my arm felt heavy, detached. I looked down. My leg was pinned. The dashboard had collapsed inward. Outside, I heard shouting. I heard a siren in the distance, growing louder. I turned my head, fighting the nausea that washed over me in waves, and looked out the shattered rear window. The car that had hit me was a dark sedan. The front end was obliterated. I tried to focus on the driver, but the darkness and the rain obscured everything. All I knew was that they had hit me hard, and they had done it without braking. Then the edges of my vision turned gray, and the sound of the rain faded into a long, low hum. I woke up to the smell of antiseptic and floor wax. It was a smell I hated. It meant loss of control. It meant vulnerability. I opened my eyes and immediately squeezed them shut again. The fluorescent lights overhead were aggressive. My head throbbed with a dull, rhythmic pressure that synced with my heartbeat. "Lila?" The voice was loud, too loud. I forced my eyes open again. A nurse was standing over me, checking the IV line in my arm. She had a kind face, tired around the eyes. "You are back with us," she said softly. "You are at Briar Glen Regional. You were in an accident." I tried to speak, but my throat was dry as sandpaper. "Water," I croaked. She held a cup with a straw to my lips. I drank greedily. Memory rushed back in jagged fragments. The rain, the lights, the crunch of metal. My leg. I tried to shift in the bed, and a gasp tore out of my throat. My right leg was encased in a heavy cast, elevated on a pillow, tibial plateau fracture. The nurse said, answering the question I had not asked yet, and a concussion. "You took quite a hit. Lila, you are lucky the airbag did its job." I stared at the ceiling tiles. I counted them. 1, 2, 3. I was not lucky. Lucky people were eating frozen pizza and watching bad reality television in their pajamas right now. I was in a hospital bed with a broken leg and a brain that felt like it was floating in gelatin. My first thought, the thought that cut through the pain and the fog, was about work. I had a presentation due on Thursday. I had 3 trucks coming in from the coast that needed routing. Who was going to handle that? I did not have enough sick leave accrued for a long stay. I had used 5 days last year when I had the flu. "I need my phone," I whispered. The nurse shook her head gently. "You need rest, but your family is here." My stomach dropped. "Not Frank. Please let it be Frank." The door swung open, and Marlene walked in. She looked as if she were arriving for a photo shoot. Her hair was perfectly blown out, a rigid helmet of blonde. She was wearing a trench coat that she kept belted, even though the hospital room was stiflingly warm. She held a large iced coffee in one hand and her phone in the other. "Oh my God," she said. The performance began. She rushed to the side of the bed, her heels clicking sharply on the linoleum. She did not touch me. She hovered over me. The phone raised. I heard the soft click of the camera shutter. "Lila, look at you," she said, her voice trembling with an emotion that felt rehearsed. "I have been so worried. I have been posting updates every hour. Everyone is praying for you." She showed me the screen. It was a picture of the hospital waiting room sign, with a long caption full of prayer hand emojis and broken heart emojis. "My baby girl is fighting." It read, "Please send strength to our family during this tragedy." "Marlene," I said. My voice sounded weak, pathetic. I hated it. She put the phone down, but her eyes were still scanning the room, checking the equipment, checking the nurse, checking everything but me. "The doctor said it is a bad break," she said, leaning in but still not making contact. "You are going to be out of commission for weeks, maybe months. I told them you are strong, though. I told them my daughter is a fighter. Mom, I need you to call my office." I said. I tried to push myself up, but the room spun. "I need you to tell Gary what happened. I can't lose this job." Marlene waved a hand dismissively. "Don't worry about that right now. Your health is the priority. I already told the nurses I am the point person. I do not want you stressing yourself out with phone calls. I felt a spike of panic. No, Mom. I need to speak to them, and I need to call my insurance. My policy number is in my glove box, but the car is gone. I need… Lila. Stop, she snapped. The mask of concern slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing the irritation underneath. You are not making sense. You have a concussion. You are confused. I will handle the insurance. I will handle Gary. You just need to lie there and heal. She reached into her oversized purse and pulled out a folder. I did not recognize it. I grabbed some paperwork from the admin desk on my way in, she said, her voice smoothing out again, becoming sugary. Just standard stuff. Authorization forms. They need to know who can make decisions for you if you go under for surgery or if you are too out of it to talk. She uncapped a pen and held it out to me. Sign right here, she said, pointing to a line at the bottom of a dense page of text. It will save so much time. You know how these hospitals are. Red tape everywhere. If you sign this, I can talk to the doctors for you. I can deal with the billing department so they do not harass you. I squinted at the paper. The words were swimming. Power of attorney. Medical authorization. Financial representative. I can't read this. I said, my eyes are blurry. You do not need to read it. Honey, it is just standard language. It just says, I am your mother, and I am here to help. Just sign it. She pressed the pen into my hand. Her fingers were cold. I hesitated. The pen hovered over the paper. My instinct, honed by years of navigating Marlene's moods and maneuvers, was screaming at me. Do not sign. Mom. I want to wait, I said. I want to read it when my head clears. Marlene sighed. A loud, dramatic exhalation of air. You are being difficult. I am trying to help you. I rushed over here in the rain. I have a migraine coming on. And you are going to make me sit here and wait while you play lawyer? It is not about that. I said, The door opened again. This time, there was no clicking of heels. There was just the quiet shuffle of rubber-soled shoes. Frank stood in the doorway. He looked older than I remembered. Or maybe it was just the harsh hospital lighting. He was wearing his rain slicker, dripping water onto the floor. He held a thermos in one hand and a small, plain black notebook in the other. His eyes, sharp and blue under bushy gray brows, took in the scene instantly. He saw the cast. He saw the fear in my eyes. He saw the pen in Marlene's hand. He walked into the room, moving with a slow, deliberate gravity. He bypassed Marlene entirely and came to the other side of my bed. He set the thermos on the bedside table. Chicken and rice, he said. His voice was gravel, rough but warm, not the cafeteria slop. Hi, Grandpa, I whispered. I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes. Real tears, not the performative ones Marlene was threatening to shed. Frank looked at Marlene. He looked at the paper she was still holding. Hello, Marlene, he said. Dad, she said. Her voice was tight. I was just helping Lila with the admission paperwork. She is confused. She needs someone to take charge. Frank looked back at me. He did not ask if I was okay. He knew I was not okay. He did not ask about the car or the leg. He looked me dead in the eye, and he asked the one question that cut through the noise. Lila, he said, did you already choose someone you trust to speak for you? The question hung in the air. Someone you trust. I looked at Marlene. She was gripping the pen so hard her knuckles were white. She looked impatient, annoyed, like a manager dealing with an incompetent employee. Then I looked at Frank. He was waiting. No pressure, just presence. I haven't signed anything. I said. Frank nodded once. Good. Not until you can read the fine print yourself. Marlene threw her hands up. This is ridiculous. She is my daughter. I have rights. She is an adult. Marlene, Frank said calmly, and she is awake. Put the paper away. Marlene glared at him, then at me. She shoved the paper back into her folder. Fine, if you want to do it the hard way, go ahead. But do not come crying to me when the insurance company denies your claim because you filled out the wrong form. She grabbed her iced coffee. I have to make some calls. I have to update the family. She stormed out, the tail of her trench coat snapping behind her. Frank pulled the visitor chair close to the bed and sat down. He opened the thermos and poured a small amount of soup into the lid. He handed it to me. "Eat," he said. "You look like a ghost." I took the soup. It smelled like garlic and thyme and home. I took a sip, and the warmth spread through my chest, loosening the knot of anxiety that had been there since I saw Marlene's name on my phone screen. She wanted me to sign a power of attorney. I said quietly. "I know," Frank said. He opened his notebook and took a pen from his pocket. He wrote something down. "Why?" I asked. Frank looked at his notes, then at me. "Because a crisis is an opportunity. Lila, for some people," he did not elaborate. He did not have to. The next 3 days were a blur of pain management, physical therapy assessments, and the slow creeping realization that my life had been derailed. Marlene's visits became sporadic. On the first day, she was there for 3 hours, mostly on her phone, complaining about the hospital Wi-Fi and the smell of the cafeteria food. She took 2 more photos of me sleeping. By the second day, she came for 20 minutes. She claimed she had a headache. She claimed the traffic was terrible. She brought me a magazine I had already read and left it on the nightstand. By the third day, she did not come at all. I texted her, "Mom, did you call Gary? I haven't heard from work." 3 hours later, she replied, "I left a message. They know. Focus on healing. This is so hard on me. Seeing you like this, I need a mental health day." I stared at the screen. Hard on her. I tried to call the office myself, but my phone died. I realized I did not have a charger. My charger was in the car, probably crushed in the wreckage. I asked the nurse if I could use the room phone, but I needed a code for long distance, and I couldn't remember the office number off the top of my head. The concussion made my memory slippery. Numbers floated away when I tried to grab them. It was Tara, my friend from college, who saved me from total isolation. She showed up on Thursday evening, soaking wet from the rain that had not stopped since the accident. She brought a bag of groceries, fruit, granola bars, juice, and a 3-pack of phone charging cables. I figured Marlene wouldn't think of the practical stuff. Tara said, plugging my phone in. She kissed my forehead. "You look like hell." "Babe, I feel like hell." I said, "My leg is throbbing, and I think I'm losing my job." "You are not losing your job," Tara said firmly. "I called Gary for you." "You did?" I exhaled, a long breath I didn't know I was holding. "Yeah, he was worried, but he also asked how long you would be out. He mentioned that the end of quarter rush is coming up. He said they might have to bring in a temp if you are gone more than 2 weeks. 2 weeks? I looked at my cast. The doctor said 6 weeks minimum before I could put weight on it, and I lived on the 2nd floor. No elevator. "I can't work from home," I said. "Not with the secure server access. I have to be in the office. We will figure it out," Tara said. "But listen, Lila, you need to watch your accounts." "What do you mean?" Tara hesitated. She pulled up a chair. "I stopped by your apartment to get your mail. There was a notice from the power company. A past due notice." I frowned. "That is impossible. I am on autopay." I checked the envelope. Tara said, "It was opened. It looks like someone opened it, read it, and put it back." Marlene had a key to my apartment. For emergencies. A cold prickle of dread walked down my spine. I finally got my phone turned on. I checked my bank app. The balance was lower than I expected. There was a withdrawal from an ATM near my mother's house, $300. It wasn't a fortune, but it was my $300, and I hadn't spent it. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she bought me things for the apartment? Maybe she was getting groceries for when I came home. But Marlene didn't buy groceries. Marlene bought takeout and wine. I called her. It went straight to voicemail. "Mom, why is there a withdrawal from my account?" I texted. No reply. The financial panic began to set in. The ambulance ride alone was going to be $1,000. The deductible on my car insurance was $500. The hospital co-pays were adding up daily, and if I lost my income, I lay there in the dark, listening to the beep of the heart monitor. I felt small. I felt like a child again, waiting for a parent to come and fix things, only to realize that the parent was the one breaking them. The next morning, a different nurse came in to change my IV bag. She was brisk, efficient, with a no-nonsense ponytail. "Your mother called the station again," she said casually as she checked the drip rate. "Oh?" I said. I tried to sound casual. "Is she coming in?" "No," the nurse said. "She was asking to speak to the attending physician. She wanted to know about your cognitive status." "My cognitive status?" "Yes. She was asking very specific questions about your decision-making capacity. Whether the concussion has rendered you—" I believe her words were temporarily incompetent. My stomach did not just drop. It vanished. "Why would she ask that?" I said, my voice trembling. The nurse paused. She looked at me, really looked at me. In her eyes, I saw pity. She said she needed to know for legal reasons. The nurse said, "To help you manage your affairs while you are incapacitated." We told her that you are alert and oriented ×4, and that we cannot discuss your medical details without your express permission. She was quite insistent. She wasn't asking because she was worried I was confused. She was asking because she wanted proof that I was confused. If I was incompetent, the power of attorney she tried to make me sign would be unnecessary. She could petition for guardianship. She could take control of my accounts, my medical decisions, my settlement, everything. I felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with the concussion. She is positioning herself. I thought, I am lying here broken, and she is moving pieces on a board I didn't even know we were playing on. I reached for the phone. My hand was shaking. I dialed Frank's number. He picked up on the second ring. "Hayes," he said. "Grandpa," I said, "I need you to come back. Today." There was a pause. Then, the sound of a chair scraping against the floor. "I am already on my way. Lila." I hung up the phone and stared at the door. I realized then that the headlights behind me on the night of the crash were not the only thing that hadn't braked. My mother was coming for me. Full speed, and she didn't plan on stopping either. I grabbed the bed rail and pulled myself up. The pain in my leg was sharp, a reminder of my physical weakness. But my mind was clearing. The fog was lifting. I remembered the notebook Frank had brought. I remembered the question, "Did you choose someone you trust?" I had not chosen. And because I had not chosen, Marlene was trying to choose for me. I looked at the side table where the empty soup thermos still sat. Beside it, the nurse had left a pitcher of water. I needed to be smart. I needed to be quiet. If Marlene knew I was onto her, she would accelerate. She would find a way to make me look unstable. She was good at that. She had been doing it my whole life, painting me as the emotional one, the fragile one, while she played the martyr. I picked up my phone and opened the banking app again. I took a screenshot of the withdrawal. Then I opened my email and started a draft. Subject, timeline. I typed, Tuesday, October 14th, accident. Marlene asks for signature on unread documents. Wednesday, October 15th. Marlene stops visiting. Thursday, October 16th. Marlene withdraws $300. Marlene asks nurse about incompetence. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The door opened. I froze. It was just the dietary aid with breakfast. Oatmeal and lukewarm coffee. I exhaled. I am not a victim. I whispered to the empty room, but as I looked at my broken leg, and the rain still lashing against the window, I knew that was not entirely true. I was a victim of a crash. I just had to make sure I didn't become a victim of what came after. The nurse's words echoed in my head. Decision-making capacity. Marlene wanted me to be helpless. She wanted me to be the little girl who needed her mommy to fix the scary world. Because if I was helpless, she was powerful. If I was dependent, she was in control, and Marlene was addicted to control the way other people were addicted to cigarettes. I took a bite of the oatmeal. It tasted like paste. I swallowed it anyway. I needed the strength. I was going to need every ounce of it, because Frank was right. This wasn't a family tragedy. It was a strategy, and I was the target. I waited for Frank, and while I waited, I planned. The next time Marlene walked through that door, she wasn't going to find a broken daughter. She was going to find a wall. I closed my eyes and listened to the rain. Somewhere out there, my car was sitting in a salvage yard, twisted and ruined. Somewhere out there, the person who hit me was living their life, maybe even fixing their own car, hiding the evidence. And somewhere out there, my mother was telling her friends how brave she was being, while she tried to steal my life out from under me. The anger started then. It wasn't a hot, explosive flash like the crash. It was cold. It was slow. It was the temperature of the rain. I opened my eyes. Let's play. Mother. Leaving the hospital felt less like a liberation and more like an eviction from the only place that was equipped to handle the wreckage of my body. The discharge nurse handed me a packet of instructions that was thick enough to be a novella, listing medication schedules, physical therapy protocols, and a terrifying list of symptoms that required immediate emergency readmission. My apartment was out of the question. It was a charming second-floor walk-up in a building that dated back to the 1920s, which meant it had character, hardwood floors, and absolutely no elevator, with a tibial plateau fracture and a leg encased in fiberglass from ankle to thigh. Those stairs might as well have been Mount Everest. Frank did not offer to take me in. He simply stated it as a geographical fact. "Your room is ready," he said as he wheeled me out to his sedan. I moved the boxes out of the guest room. I put the rug in the attic so you will not trip. I sat in the passenger seat, gripping the handle above the door as Frank navigated the wet streets of Briar Glen. Every pothole sent a fresh jolt of electricity through my leg. I felt fragile, breakable, a piece of china that had been glued back together and was liable to shatter at the slightest vibration. We pulled up to Frank's house. It was a small, white bungalow with black shutters and a porch that was swept clean of leaves. It was the house my mother had grown up in. The house I had escaped to during the chaotic summers of my childhood. It was tidy, quiet, and smelled of lemon polish and old paper. Getting inside was a production. Frank had rented a ramp, a metal monstrosity that covered his front steps. He guided me up, his hand firm on my elbow, taking my weight without grunting or complaining. I hated it. I hated the weakness. I hated the way my breath hitched when I tried to swing my good leg forward. I was 33 years old. I was supposed to be independent. I was supposed to be the one checking on him. We made it to the guest room. It was exactly as I remembered it. A twin bed with a quilt my grandmother had stitched, a heavy oak dresser, and a window that looked out onto the backyard garden. It was sparse, clean, and safe. "Get settled," Frank said. "I will start the kettle." He closed the door, leaving me alone with my cast and my humiliating bag of hospital belongings. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the wall. I felt a heavy, suffocating blanket of depression settle over me. I was trapped. I was broke. And for the first time in years, I was a child in my grandfather's house, waiting to be fed. The first few days at Frank's established a rhythm that was both comforting and stark. Frank was not a nurse, but he was a man of systems. He treated my recovery like a project that required logistical precision. At 8 a.m, he knocked on the door with a tray, toast, cut into triangles, a bowl of fruit, a glass of water, 2 pills. At 10, he came in to help me to the living room, where he had cleared a space for me to do the isometric exercises the physical therapist had assigned. At noon, soup. At 2, a nap. He did not hover. He did not coo. He did not ask me how I was feeling in that cloying, invasive way Marlene did. He asked practical questions. Is the pain manageable? Do you need more ice? Can you reach the water pitcher? He treated me like an adult who had encountered a setback. Not a burden that had been dumped on his doorstep. It was a dignity I did not know I needed until he gave it to me. But the quiet of Frank's house had a side effect. It amplified the silence from everywhere else. Specifically, the silence from my mother. Marlene had vanished. Since her performative exit from the hospital, she had not called. She had not texted. I checked her social media, a masochistic habit I could not break, and saw that she was very much active. She was posting photos of autumn leaves, inspirational quotes about resilience, and vague, sad-faced selfies captioned "Staying strong through the storm." She was curating the tragedy for an audience, but she was absent from the scene of the crash. I lay on Frank's couch on the fourth day, my leg propped up on 3 pillows, staring at the dust motes dancing in the afternoon sun. "She is not coming, is she?" I said. Frank was in his armchair, reading the local paper. He lowered it slowly. "Do you need her to come?" he asked. I thought about it. I thought about the way she sucked the oxygen out of the room. I thought about the way she made every conversation about her own stress levels. "No," I said, "I guess I don't, but it is weird, isn't it? She loves a crisis. Usually, she would be here trying to reorganize your kitchen and telling me I look pale." Frank folded the paper. "She is busy," he said. "Busy with what?" Frank looked at me over his reading glasses. His eyes were unreadable. "Positioning," he said. The word hung in the air, heavy and ominous. 2 days later, the silence broke. I was in the middle of a painful session of ankle pumps, trying to keep the blood flowing in my bad leg. When the front door opened, I didn't need to see who it was. The sudden change in atmospheric pressure was enough. "Hello?" Marlene's voice rang out, bright and artificial. She breezed into the living room. She was wearing a new coat, something camel-colored and expensive-looking, and carrying a thick leather portfolio. She looked rested. She looked vibrant. She looked like someone who had not spent the last week in a hospital bed or sleeping in a guest room that smelled of mothballs. "Lila, look at you," she said, stopping just short of hugging me. "You look so much better. The color is coming back to your cheeks." "Hi, Mom," I said. I stopped my exercises and pulled the blanket over my cast. Frank walked in from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "Marlene," he said, "we were not expecting you." I know. I have been running around like a headless chicken," Marlene said, dismissing him with a wave of her manicured hand. "But I finally got everything sorted." She sat down on the coffee table, directly in front of me, invading my personal space. She placed the leather portfolio on her lap and patted it affectionately. "I have been so worried about you." "Lila," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I know I haven't been here physically, but I have been working tirelessly behind the scenes. I wanted to make sure you didn't have to worry about a single thing." "What are you talking about?" I asked. Marlene unzipped the portfolio. She pulled out a thick stack of papers, clipped together with a heavy binder clip. The top page had a logo embossed in dark blue ink. Alder and Bram, LLP. "I went to see a specialist," she said, "a top-tier firm." I told them everything. The accident, the medical bills, the insurance mess, the fact that you can't work right now, and they agreed with me. "You need protection." She handed the packet to me. "It is a comprehensive management plan," she said. "It allows me to handle everything. The insurance claims, your rent, your car payments, the lawsuit against the other driver. I can take all of that weight off your shoulders. All you have to do is focus on getting your legs strong again." I looked down at the paperwork. It wasn't blank. Every field was already filled in. My name, my social security number, my address, my bank account information, details she must have pulled from old files or memorized years ago. I flipped to the second page. Power of attorney, durable, financial, medical. I flipped to the third page. Asset management. My eyes scanned the dense legal jargon. I saw phrases like unrestricted access and full authority to liquidate. "Mom," I said, my voice tight. "This is a lot." "It has to be a lot to be effective," Marlene said quickly. "The system is designed to crush people like us. Lila, if we do not have the heavy artillery, they will walk all over you." I looked at the signature line. There was a sticky note with a bright pink arrow pointing to it. "Sign here." She had even dated it. Today's date. "I am not signing this," I said. The smile on Marlene's face didn't vanish, but it froze. It became a rictus, a mask of pleasantry stretched over something hard and sharp. "What do you mean?" she asked. "I mean, I am not signing it. Not right now. I haven't even read it. Lila. Don't be paranoid. She laughed. A brittle sound. I paid a lot of money to have these drawn up. These are professionals. They know what they are doing. I am sure they do. I said, but I don't know what you are doing. This gives you access to everything. My bank accounts, my medical records, I squinted at a paragraph near the bottom. My ability to settle claims? Yes, Marlene exclaimed, throwing her hands up as if the answer were obvious. Imagine the insurance adjuster calls with a lowball offer while you are asleep or in therapy. Do you want to miss out because you couldn't answer the phone? I can negotiate for you. I can get you what you deserve. Or you can take a settlement I don't want. I said. Frank stepped forward. His shadow fell over the coffee table, cutting the light between Marlene and me. She said she is not signing it. Marlene, Frank said. Marlene whipped her head around to face him. Her eyes were blazing. This is your doing, isn't it? She spat. Excuse me? Frank said. You are poisoning her against me, she said. Standing up, she towered over him in her heels. But Frank didn't flinch. You have her tucked away in this little house, playing nursemaid, whispering in her ear. You want her to be dependent on you. You always wanted to be the hero. Dad. But you are just an old man who doesn't understand how the modern world works. I am not the one asking for her signature on a document she hasn't read. Frank said calmly. Marlene turned back to me. Her face was flushed. Lila, you are not thinking clearly, she said. Her voice was trembling with suppressed rage. You have a concussion. You are on painkillers. You are not capable of making these decisions right now. That is exactly why you need this. I am thinking perfectly clearly. I said. I felt a surge of adrenaline that made my hands shake. I am thinking that I am 33 years old, and if I need a lawyer, I will hire one. I am thinking that you filled this out without asking me. I did it for you, she screamed. It echoed in the small living room. The silence that followed was ringing. Marlene stared at me, her chest heaving. She looked at the papers in my lap, then at Frank, then back to me. She realized she had pushed too hard. She realized the mask had slipped too far. Fine, she said. She snatched her purse from the floor. She didn't take the papers. If you want to drown, Lila, go ahead. Drown. But don't call me when the bills pile up and you are living in a cardboard box. She turned and marched to the door. She slammed it so hard the windows rattled in their frames. I sat there, stunned, my heart hammering against my ribs. The packet of papers lay heavy on my lap. Frank walked over to the window and watched her car peel away from the curb. He waited until the sound of her engine faded into the distance. Then he turned to me. Are you all right? He asked. I don't know. I said. I felt like I wanted to cry, but I was too angry. Frank reached down and picked up the packet of papers. He weighed them in his hand, as if estimating the density of the threat. I'm going to borrow these, he said. Where are you going? I asked. To see Celine, he said. Celine Ward was a name I knew from Frank's stories. She was a local attorney, a woman who had practiced in Briar Glen for 40 years. She was the kind of lawyer who operated out of a converted Victorian house and didn't have a website, but who knew where every skeleton in the county was buried. Frank left within the hour. He didn't ask me to come. He knew I was exhausted, and he knew I couldn't handle the stairs at Celine's office. I spent the afternoon staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene with Marlene. You are not thinking clearly. It was gaslighting, pure and simple. She was trying to use my injury as evidence of my incompetence. Frank returned just before dinner. He looked grim. He carried the packet of papers as if it were radioactive waste. He sat down in the chair beside the couch and took a notepad out of his pocket. I showed them to Celine. He said, And? Frank sighed. He rubbed his face with his hand, a gesture of weariness I rarely saw from him. She said you were right to refuse. He said, She said she has seen broad powers of attorney before, but this was aggressive. How aggressive? I asked. Frank put his reading glasses on and consulted his notes. It is a general durable power of attorney with an unlimited gifting rider. He read, What does that mean? It means, Frank said, looking up at me, that if you signed this, Marlene could legally transfer your assets to herself as a gift without your permission. She could empty your savings. She could sell your car. She could take out loans in your name. I felt cold, not the chill of the drafty house, but a deep, internal freezing. And the medical part? I asked. It gives her the right to override your doctors. Frank said, she could decide where you do rehab. She could decide what medications you take. She could decide to move you into a facility if she deemed it necessary. And the lawsuit? That is the worst part. Frank said, there is a clause in the litigation section. It gives her the sole authority to settle any personal injury claims on your behalf. She could accept a settlement from the other driver's insurance company for $10, sign the release, and you would never be able to sue for the real cost of your care. Why would she do that? I whispered. Why would she want me to get less? She doesn't want you to get less, Frank said. She wants to control the money flow. If she settles it, the check goes to her, as your representative. I closed my eyes. It wasn't just greed. It was predation. My mother had looked at my broken body and seen a payday. Celine drafted something else, Frank said softly. He pulled a thin single-page document from his pocket. This is a limited medical authorization, he said. It allows Marlene, or anyone else you name, to talk to the doctors and get updates. That is it. No financial power, no decision-making power, just information. He placed it on the table. Celine said this is what a mother usually asks for. He added, I looked at the single page. It was reasonable. It was safe. And I hated it. I hated that I needed it. I hated that I was in a position where I needed anyone to speak for me. And I was furious that my mother had tried to take a mile when I hadn't even offered an inch. I am not naming her. I said. Frank nodded. Who do you want to name? You. I said. Frank didn't smile. He just took a pen, wrote his name in the blank space, and handed it to me to sign. I trust you. I said. I know. He said. And that is why we have to be careful, because she knows it too. The counterattack began quietly. It didn't start with a confrontation. It started with the mail. Since I was staying at Frank's, I had set up a mail forwarding service. A week after the incident with the papers, the first batch of forwarded envelopes arrived. Most of it was junk, but there were 3 envelopes that made me pause. The first was from a company called Storage King. It was a past due notice for a unit in a town 30 miles away. The account was in my name. The second was a letter from a credit card company I didn't bank with, thanking me for my recent application and asking for additional verification of income. The third was a bill for a wellness subscription service, addressed to me, but mailed to my mother's address. I sat at Frank's kitchen table. The envelopes spread out before me like tarot cards of doom. I don't have a storage unit, I said. Frank was at the stove, making tea. He turned around and looked at the papers. Let me see, he said. He picked up the Storage King bill. He looked at the date. The rental began 4 months ago. He picked up the credit card letter. The application date was 3 weeks ago, 2 days before my accident. Lila, he said slowly. This has been going on longer than the crash. I felt a wave of nausea. Identity theft was a faceless crime. You imagined hackers in a basement in a foreign country. You didn't imagine your mother, sitting at her kitchen table, practicing your signature. But the subscription was mailed to her house, I said. She didn't even try to hide that one. She is sloppy, Frank said, or she is arrogant. She thinks you won't check. She thinks you are too busy being a good girl to look at the details. He sat down across from me. He looked older today. The lines around his mouth were etched deeper. There is something I need to tell you, he said. I waited. Marlene has been coming to see me for months. He said, before your accident, she comes over on Sundays. Usually, she brings donuts. She talks about how hard it is to manage a house this size. She talks about property taxes. He paused, his fingers tracing the wood grain of the table. She has been pushing me to put her name on the deed. He said, she calls it simplifying the estate. She says it will save on probate taxes when I die. She brought a lawyer friend over once, a man from Alder and Bram, the same firm. I said, yes. She wanted me to sign a trust she had drawn up. It would have made her the trustee. Immediate control. What did you do? I told her to get off my porch, Frank said. He looked at me, his blue eyes fierce. I thought she gave up, he said. But she didn't give up. She just pivoted. She couldn't get to your money, I said, realizing the horror of the logic. So she went after mine. Frank nodded. And then you got hurt. And suddenly, she saw a way to get both. If she controls you, and I die, or if she can prove I am incompetent, she gets everything. I finished. We sat in silence. The rain had started again, tapping against the kitchen window. It felt like the walls were closing in. We were two people in a small house, besieged by someone who shared our blood. That night, I couldn't sleep. My leg was aching, a deep, throbbing bone pain that laughed at the ibuprofen I had taken. I got up to get a glass of water. I maneuvered my crutches down the hallway, moving as silently as I could. The floorboards creaked under my weight. I saw a light coming from the kitchen. Frank was up. I stopped in the hallway shadows. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but the tone of his voice made me freeze. It wasn't his usual gravelly, calm register. It was sharp, urgent. No, he said. There was a pause. He was listening to someone on the other end of the line. I don't care what the timeline is usually, Frank said. We don't have the luxury of usual. She is escalating. She tried to get the girl to sign a power of attorney last week. The girl, me, another pause. I am holding her off, Frank said, but I am 81 years old. Celine, if something happens to me tomorrow, Marlene walks in here and takes it all. She takes the house, she takes the accounts, and she leaves Lila with nothing. I leaned against the wall, my heart pounding. No, Frank said firmly, not until the trust is executed. I want the papers ready to sign by Friday, irrevocable, and I want the fiduciary named, no family members. He listened for a moment longer. Do it, he said. Cost is not an issue. Safety is the issue. He hung up the phone. I stood there in the dark, clutching my crutches. I had always thought of Frank as stubborn. I had thought of him as a simple man who liked his routine and his privacy. But he wasn't just stubborn. He was playing a game of chess I hadn't even known existed. Not until the trust is executed. He was changing his will. He was locking Marlene out. He was building a fortress around his assets, and by extension, around me. I backed away slowly, returning to my room before he could catch me. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands shaking. Marlene was right about one thing. Frank had been keeping secrets, but unlike her, his secrets weren't designed to trap me. They were designed to set me free. But as I lay back down, staring at the dark ceiling, a new fear took root. Frank was 81. He was racing against time, and Marlene was desperate. If she found out what he was doing before he signed those papers, there was no telling what she would do. The accident had been a convenient distraction, but if Frank made his move, it would be war, and I was sitting right in the middle of the battlefield, with a broken leg and a stack of bills for a life I hadn't lived. I closed my eyes. Friday, he had said. We just had to make it to Friday. The mail arrived in a thick rubber-banded bundle, forwarded from my apartment to Frank's front porch. I sat at the kitchen table with a letter opener, slicing through envelopes with a kind of grim determination. I was looking for bills. I was looking for warnings. But what I found was something far more insidious, a conversation that had been happening without me. The first anomaly was a letter from my auto insurance provider. It was not a bill. It was a confirmation of a change of address. Dear Ms. Hayes, per your request, we have updated your primary correspondence address to 442 Elm Street. Elm Street was my mother's house. My hands went cold. I had never made that request. I dug deeper into the pile. There was a letter from the medical claims adjuster. Regarding claim number 4920, we have received the supplemental documents from your family representative and are proceeding with the expedited review. Family representative. The phrase stuck in my throat like a fishbone. I picked up my phone. There was a voicemail I had missed earlier that morning while I was in the shower. I dialed into the mailbox. Hi, Lila. This is Karen from the claims department. I just wanted to circle back on the settlement figures your mother discussed with us yesterday. We are drafting the initial offer based on her input regarding your long-term prognosis. Give us a call when you can. I lowered the phone. My mother was not just positioning herself. She was actively negotiating the value of my broken leg while I sat in my grandfather's guest room eating toast. She was discussing my prognosis with strangers. I called Celine Ward's office immediately. I need the full file. I told her receptionist. I need every piece of paper that has been submitted to the insurance company in my name. Today. Celine arrived at Frank's house 3 hours later. She carried a heavy accordion folder and looked like a woman who had gone 10 rounds with a bear and won. She laid the files out on the dining room table. Frank sat at the head, his face set in stone. Here's the request for the address change, Celine said, sliding a sheet of paper toward me. And here's the authorization for Marlene to act as the primary contact. I looked at the bottom of the page. There was a signature. Lila Hayes. It was good. It was terrifyingly good. It had the loop on the L that I always made. It had the sharp slant to the right, but as I leaned closer, I saw the tell. The ink was slightly pooled at the top of the H, as if the pen had hesitated. The lines were just a fraction too deliberate. It lacked the fluid, muscle memory speed of a real signature. It was a tracing. She traced it. I whispered, she must have had an old birthday card, or a check I wrote her. She put it under the paper and traced it. This is fraud. Frank said. His voice was low, vibrating with a rage I rarely heard. It is forgery, Celine corrected, and it is actionable. But if we file a police report now, it blows everything up. Marlene will claim she was acting in an emergency. She will claim you were incapacitated and she was just trying to help. The police in this town, well, they know Marlene. She brings them cookies. She organizes the charity drive. They will see it as a domestic misunderstanding. So what do we do? I asked. I felt violated. My name, my identity, was being worn by her like a costume. We stopped the bleeding, Frank said. He stood up and walked to the sideboard. He pulled out a thick, bound document with a blue cover. He placed it in the center of the table. I told you I was making a move, he said to me. It is done. I looked at the document. The Franklin Hayes Irrevocable Family Trust. I executed it this morning. Frank said, Celine recorded the deed transfer an hour ago. He sat back down, folding his hands. Everything I own, this house, my savings, the investment accounts, the small rental property on the south side, is now the property of the trust. I am no longer the owner. I am simply the beneficiary, and the trustee is not me. It is not you, and it is certainly not Marlene. Who is it? I asked. A fiduciary firm in the city. Celine answered. A man named Mr. Henderson. He is a professional administrator. He is cold. He is by the book, and he does not care about Marlene's cookies or her tears. Frank looked at me, his eyes softening. It means she cannot touch me. Lila. If she tries to petition the court for guardianship, she gets authority over a man with no assets. She can scream and cry, but the money is locked in a vault she does not have the key to, and the trust has a specific clause. It provides for your recovery and legal defense, fully funded, at the discretion of the trustee. I felt a rush of relief so profound it made me dizzy. Marlene had been playing checkers, trying to capture pieces one by one. Frank had just flipped the board, but she is not going to like it, Frank added darkly. When she finds out, and she will find out, probably when she tries to access the bank account again, she is going to lash out. She lashed out faster than we expected, and she didn't use lawyers. She used the town. Briar Glen was the kind of place where privacy was a myth. Information traveled through the grocery store checkout line faster than fiber optic cables. 2 days after Frank executed the trust, I finally felt strong enough to leave the house. Tara came to pick me up. I wanted to go to the pharmacy myself to pick up my refill. I wanted to feel normal. We walked into the drugstore, me on my crutches, Tara hovering protectively at my elbow. The bell on the door chimed. Mrs. Higgins was behind the counter. She had known me since I was 5. She had given me lollipops when I scraped my knee. "Hi, Mrs. Higgins," I said, leaning against the counter. "Just picking up a refill for Hayes." Mrs. Higgins looked up. Her smile was tight. It didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, hello. Lila." She glanced at Tara, then back to me. "We were just talking about you. Were you?" I asked. "Your mother was in yesterday," she said. She lowered her voice. Leaning over the counter, she was picking up her own prescription. She seemed very distraught. My stomach tightened. "She told us about the trouble you have been having," Mrs. Higgins said, with the confusion. "Since the accident." "Confusion?" I said. "I have a broken leg." Mrs. Higgins nodded sympathetically, in the way one nods at a toddler claiming they didn't eat the cookie. "Of course, dear. Marlene just mentioned that the head injury was causing some instability, mood swings, paranoia. She said you were having trouble distinguishing reality from stress. She was asking if the medication might be exacerbating it." I stood there, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Marlene wasn't just stealing my money. She was stealing my credibility. She was planting the seeds of unstable so that when I finally stood up and accused her of theft, everyone would just nod and say, "Poor Lila. It's the concussion talking. I am fine." "Mrs. Higgins," I said, my voice shaking despite my best efforts. "My head is fine, I am sure." "Dear," she said. She handed me the bag. "You just take care of yourself, and be nice to your mother. She is carrying such a heavy load." I walked out of the store, my knuckles white on the handles of my crutches. "She is gaslighting the whole zip code," Tara said as we got into her car. She slammed the door. "That is impressive, in a terrified for my life kind of way. It is a strategy," I said, staring out the window. "If I am crazy, she is the saintly guardian. If I am paranoid, her forgery is just managing a difficult situation." Tara started the engine. "Well, if we are playing detective, I have something for you." She reached into the back seat and pulled out a manila envelope. "I went to the police station this morning," she said. "I asked for the full accident report. Not the summary they gave you at the hospital, the full field notes." She opened the envelope and pulled out a photocopy of a handwritten page. "Read the witness statement," she said. I took the paper. The handwriting was cramped. Typical cop scratch. Witness, J. Miller, stated he was traveling southbound. Observed victim vehicle, silver sedan, traveling at speed limit. Observed suspect vehicle, dark sedan, Pasco, older model, following victim vehicle closely for approximately 2 miles. I scanned down. Witness states suspect vehicle appeared to be mirroring victim's lane changes. Erratic driving. Witness observed suspect vehicle accelerate rapidly just prior to intersection. No brake lights observed from suspect vehicle before impact. I looked up at Tara. "Mirroring my lane changes," I said. "That's not an accident. That's tailing." "Exactly," Tara said. "And the no brake lights part? That confirms what you saw. They didn't try to stop. Lila, they used their car like a battering ram." I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. "Why didn't the police pursue this?" I asked. Tara pointed to a box at the bottom of the form. "Road conditions. Heavy rain / poor visibility. Contributing factor. Weather. They wrote it off," she said. "It was a rainy Tuesday. Easier to call it a weather-related chain reaction than to investigate a hit-and-run with a phantom car." "I need to see the footage," I said. "There is a traffic camera at that intersection." "I know there is. I have seen the tickets people get in the mail." "I thought of that." Tara said, "I called the city clerk." "And?" "Unavailable," she said. "System overwrite. They only keep the data for 48 hours unless there is a felony request. Since it was marked as an accident, it was wiped." I slammed my hand against the dashboard. "Convenient. Too convenient," a voice said from outside the car. I jumped. Frank was standing there. We were parked in his driveway. I hadn't even realized we had arrived. He was leaning down, looking through the open window. "Frank," I said, "we were just talking about the camera," he finished. He opened the car door and helped me out. "Come inside," he said. "Sully is here." Sully was a retired city contractor, a man who had built half the sidewalks in Briar Glen and knew where every pipe and cable was buried. He was sitting at Frank's kitchen table, nursing a cup of black coffee. He looked like a bulldog in a flannel shirt. "Lila," Sully said, nodding at me. "Sorry about the leg." Sully used to maintain the traffic grid. Frank said, "Before they privatized it." I sat down. "What do you know about the camera at the underpass?" I asked. Sully grimaced. "I know the system. It's automated. It overwrites on a loop. But here's the thing, Lila. It doesn't overwrite if the camera is offline." "What do you mean?" "I still have friends in the maintenance division," Sully said. "I asked around. That camera wasn't overwritten. It was down." "Down?" "Maintenance request," Sully said. "Put in at 4 in the afternoon on the day of your crash. Reported a connectivity issue. The crew went out the next morning and found nothing wrong. They rebooted it, and it was fine. But for those 12 hours, it was a brick on a pole. 4 in the afternoon," I whispered. "I left work at 5:30. Someone turned it off." Tara said, "Or someone knew it was going to be off." Sully shrugged. "It could be a coincidence. Electronics are finicky, but the request came from an external IP address. It wasn't an automated system flag. Someone logged in and reported a fault that didn't exist." I looked at Frank. His face was grim. "Marlene isn't a hacker," I said. "She can barely use her iPad." "No," Frank said. "She isn't. But she knows people who are useful, and she is desperate." "How desperate?" I asked. We found out the next day just how desperate she was. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Marlene. "Lila, please. I know things are tense. I know Frank is filling your head with nonsense. But I found a solution for the medical bills. I found a billing advocate who can cut the debt in half. We need to act fast. Meet me at the Daily Grind in an hour? Just listen. For your own sake." I showed the text to Frank. "Don't go," he said immediately. "I have to." I said, "If I don't go." She spins it. She tells everyone I refused her help. She tells everyone I'm irrational, and I need to see her face. I need to see if she knows about the trust. "Tara offered to drive me. I will sit at the next table," she said. "If she tries anything, I will spill my latte on her." The Daily Grind was busy, filled with the noise of espresso machines and chatter. Marlene was sitting in a booth in the back. She wasn't alone. Sitting across from her was a man I didn't recognize. He was wearing a suit that was slightly too shiny. He had a notepad and a digital recorder on the table. I hobbled over on my crutches. Marlene looked up. Her smile was tight, anxious. "Lila, you came." She stood up to help me, but I planted my crutches firmly. "Who is this?" I asked. "This is Mr. Vance," she said. "He is the advocate I told you about. He works with families in crisis." "To restructure debt, Mr. Vance stood up. He had a handshake that felt like a wet fish. "Pleasure. Miss Hayes," he said, "your mother has told me a great deal about your situation." I sat down. I didn't take off my coat. "What can you do for me, Mr. Vance?" I asked. Mr. Vance smiled. He didn't look at his notes. He looked at me, his eyes scanning my face, my cast, my hands. "Well, to properly assess your eligibility for debt relief, I need to understand the full financial picture." He said, specifically, the assets available to the family unit. He clicked his pen. "Your mother mentioned that your grandfather, Mr. Hayes, has been somewhat forgetful lately. Is that correct?" I froze. "What does my grandfather's memory have to do with my hospital bill?" I asked. "Mr. Vance nodded smoothly. "It speaks to the stability of the household assets. If Mr. Hayes is unable to manage his affairs, and you are residing with him, it creates a liability. We need to establish who the primary decision-maker is. If we can show that Mr. Hayes is compromised, we can petition to have the assets frozen and protected under a guardianship umbrella. That would shield them from your creditors." I looked at Marlene. She was watching me, her eyes wide and pleading. "It is a loophole. Lila," she said. If Dad is not competent, the creditors can't touch the house. We can save everything. I looked back at Mr. Vance. You aren't a billing advocate, are you? I said. Mr. Vance blinked. I am a consultant for... You are building a case, I said, my voice rising. You are trying to get me to go on record saying my grandfather is senile. You are recording this, aren't you? I pointed to the device on the table. The red light was steady. Marlene reached out and covered my hand. Lila, stop. You are being paranoid. No, I said, pulling my hand away. I am being smart. Finally, I grabbed my crutches and stood up. It was clumsy, and I knocked a spoon off the table, but I didn't care. My grandfather is sharper than both of you combined, I said, and he has already made his move. Ask him about the trust. Mom, ask him about the fiduciary. Marlene's face went white. The color drained out of her skin so fast it looked like a physical blow. What trust? She whispered. I leaned down. The one that cuts you out. I turned and walked away. I heard Marlene calling my name, her voice shrill and panicked. But I didn't stop. Tara was already at the door, holding it open for me. We walked out into the cool air, leaving Marlene in the wreckage of her ambush. She knows now, I said as we got into the car. Yeah, Tara said. You dropped the nuke. I felt a strange mixture of triumph and nausea. I had won the skirmish, but I had escalated the war. When we got back to Frank's, Celine was there again, and she had brought someone else. He was a small man, nondescript, wearing a beige jacket and wire-rimmed glasses. He looked like an accountant or a librarian. Lila, Frank said. This is Mr. Greaves. Mr. Greaves nodded politely. Private investigator, he said. His voice was soft, unassuming. I looked at Frank. You hired a PI? I had to, Frank said. Once we found the forged signatures, we needed to know the why. Greed is one thing, but this level of risk? Forging documents, setting up fake advocates? That speaks of desperation. We needed to know what she is running from. I sat down. I hated this. I hated digging through my mother's life. It felt dirty, but I remembered the headlights. I remembered the text messages. I remembered the look on her face when I mentioned the trust. What did you find? I asked. Mr. Greaves opened a folder. He didn't add dramatic flair. He just laid out the facts. Your mother is insolvent, he said. I frowned. She has a job. She has the house. She has a second mortgage on the house, Mr. Greaves said. Took it out 2 years ago, and she hasn't paid it in 4 months. She is in pre-foreclosure. But why? Where did the money go? Do you know a company called Lumina Wellness? He asked. I nodded. It was some essential oil thing she was into a few years ago. She tried to sell me a starter kit. It wasn't just a kit. Mr. Greaves said. She bought into the master distributor tier. She spent $50,000 on inventory. It is sitting in a storage unit in New Jersey. She never sold it. 50,000? I gasped. That was the beginning, he said. She took out high-interest personal loans to cover the payments on the second mortgage. Then she took out payday loans to cover the personal loans. She is drowning. Ms. Hayes, she owes upwards of $200,000 to various creditors, and the walls are closing in. He placed a document on the table. It was a photocopy of a loan application from a private lender, the kind that breaks kneecaps, not credit scores. Look at the collateral. Mr. Greaves said. I looked. Listed under real estate assets was 442 Elm Street, Frank's house. She tried to list this property. Mr. Greaves said. She submitted a deed transfer document claiming she was the owner. The lender flagged it because the county records didn't match. That was 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, I whispered, just before the crash. She needs the house, Frank said softly. She needs it to pay off the sharks, and she can't get it while I am alive and competent, or while I am alive and competent enough to stop her. I realized, if she controls me, she controls my inheritance. If she controls Frank, she liquidates the house. It wasn't just about money, it was about survival. She had dug a hole so deep she was willing to bury us in it to climb out. I looked at the crash report that Tara had left on the table. The dark sedan. The mirroring, the timing, Mr. Greaves. I said, "Can you find out who was driving the car that hit me?" "I am working on it," he said. "But there is a connection you should know about. The loan officer at the bank where she tried to submit the forged deed? Yes. He drives a dark blue sedan. Mr. Greaves said, and he was fired last week for ethical violations involving client accounts." I felt the room spin. She didn't just wait for an accident. I said, "She might have created the conditions for one." I looked at Frank. He wasn't surprised. He looked sad, a deep, bone-weary sadness of a father who realizes his child has become a monster. "We are going to fight. Lila," he said. I looked at my cast. I looked at the pile of evidence, the forgeries, the debts, the lies. "No," I said, "we aren't just going to fight. We are going to finish it." I picked up the phone. "Who are you calling?" Tara asked. "Celine." I said, "I want to file the revocation. I want to formally alert the insurance company. And I want to request a restraining order. Against your mother? Against the woman who tried to sell us out." I said. The line rang. "Statewide Mutual. Claims Department. This is Lila Hayes." I said. My voice was steady. It was the voice of the woman who managed logistics for 3 states. It was the voice of Frank Hayes' granddaughter. "I need to report a fraudulent representation on my file. And I have evidence. Outside." The rain began to fall again, but inside, for the first time in weeks, the fog was gone. I could see everything clearly, and what I saw was war. Physical recovery was a deceptive metric. By the end of the 3rd week, the bruising on my ribs had faded to a sickly yellow, and the swelling in my knee had gone down enough for the doctor to replace the heavy plaster cast with a walking boot. I could stand in the shower without feeling like I was going to faint. I could make my own coffee, on paper. I was healing, but the body remembers what the mind tries to bury. I started waking up at 3 in the morning, gasping for air. The sound of tearing metal echoing in my ears. I couldn't ride in a car at night. The sweep of headlights across the dashboard made my heart hammer so hard my vision blurred. I found myself flinching when the toaster popped, or when a door slammed too hard in the wind. And beneath the PTSD, there was a deeper, more humiliating ache. I still checked my phone. I still waited, with a pathetic, childish hope, for Marlene to text me something that wasn't a manipulation. "How are you? Did you sleep well? I love you." I wanted my mother, not the woman who was trying to steal my identity, but the idea of her, the version of her that existed in old photo albums, holding me on her hip at the beach, smiling like she meant it. I hated myself for it. I hated that even as I built a legal fortress against her, I left the drawbridge down just a crack, waiting for her to cross it without a weapon. She didn't. Celine filed the formal revocation of authority on a Tuesday. It was a sterile, bureaucratic act, a fax sent to the insurance company, a certified letter to the hospital, but the response was immediate and revealing. I was sitting in Celine's office, my leg propped up on a spare chair. When she put the insurance adjuster on speakerphone, "Ms. Hayes," the adjuster said. He sounded tired, wary. "We have received the revocation. I have to say this clarifies a lot of confusion on our end." "What kind of confusion?" Celine asked, her pen hovering over her legal pad. "Well, the previous representative, your mother, was extremely persistent," he said. "She called 3, sometimes 4 times a day. She was very aggressive about the timeline for the settlement check. She kept insisting that we bypass the medical review because the family had urgent expenses." "Urgent expenses," I repeated. "Yes, she mentioned medical equipment, home modifications. She even claimed she needed to put a down payment on a specialized vehicle for you. We were close to cutting a preliminary check for $20,000 just to get her to stop calling. $20,000. It would have vanished into the black hole of her debt before the ink was dry. "We will lock the file now," the adjuster said. "No one speaks to us but you or Miss Ward, and frankly, Ms. Hayes, I am sorry. It is not usually this messy. It is not usually this messy. That was the polite way of saying your mother is a predator. The next day, Marlene stopped calling the insurance company. She filed a petition with the county court instead. Frank was served the papers at breakfast. A sheriff's deputy, a man Frank played cards with at the VFW, knocked on the door with his hat in his hand. "Sorry, Frank," the deputy mumbled. "I just have to deliver them." Frank took the envelope without a word. He sat back down at the kitchen table, put on his glasses, and read the document. He didn't look angry. He looked resigned. "She has done it," he said quietly. He handed the papers to me. Petition for emergency temporary guardianship. Petitioner: Marlene Hayes. Respondent: Franklin Hayes. Reason for petition: Respondent is displaying signs of advanced cognitive decline, financial mismanagement, and vulnerability to undue influence. Petitioner requests immediate control of estate and medical decisions for the protection of the respondent. "She is saying you are senile," I said, my voice rising in disbelief. "She is saying you can't take care of yourself. Read the next paragraph." Frank said, Petitioner further alleges that respondent's granddaughter, Lila Hayes, currently residing in the home, is physically incapacitated and emotionally unstable following a severe head trauma, and is contributing to the chaotic environment, further necessitating external intervention. "She threw me under the bus, too," I whispered. "She is painting a picture of a madhouse. Two crazy people living in squalor, needing her steady hand to save us. It is a narrative," Frank said. "And in court, narrative matters as much as fact." The hearing was set for 10 days out. 10 days to prepare. 10 days to prove that my grandfather, who did the Sunday crossword in ink and balanced his checkbook to the penny, was not losing his mind. And 10 days to prove that I, the victim of a car crash, was not a hysterical burden. I had to write a statement. Celine told me it was crucial. "You need to sound rational, loving, and clear," she said. "Do not sound angry. Judges hate family drama. If you sound bitter, you validate Marlene's claim that you are emotionally unstable." So I sat at my laptop, typing and deleting, typing and deleting. I had to describe my mother's betrayal without using the word betrayal. I had to explain her financial abuse without sounding like I was keeping score. I had to strip the emotion out of the most emotional thing that had ever happened to me. I felt like I was performing an autopsy on my own heart. While I struggled with the statement, Mr. Greaves, the private investigator, was digging deeper. He came to the house 2 days after the petition was filed. He looked more serious than usual. He didn't sit down. "I found something," he said. He pulled a single sheet of paper from his jacket pocket. It was a printout of an email. "This is from the server of Alder and Bram," he said. "I have a contact in their IT department. Don't ask." He slid it across the table. From Marlene Hayes to J. Bram. Date September 12th. September 12th. A full month before my accident. Subject: question about estate control. "Hi, Jim. Quick question for you. If a family member becomes medically impaired, say, a stroke or a serious accident, is there a way to fast-track the power of attorney if they haven't signed one yet? Specifically, if I need to access funds immediately for their care? Let's grab lunch soon." I stared at the date. September 12th. She wasn't just reacting to my crash, I said, my blood running cold. She was researching it. She was looking for a scenario where I, or Frank, would be incapacitated. "It is hypothetical," Frank said, reading over my shoulder. "She asks about a stroke or an accident, but the intention is there." Mr. Greaves said, "She was shopping for a crisis. She needed a way to bypass your consent, and when the accident happened, well, she was ready. She knew exactly who to call and what forms to print. I felt sick. It wasn't just opportunism, it was premeditation. Maybe she didn't cut my brake lines, but she had certainly prepared the grave she wanted to push me into. I need to talk to her." I said, "Lila?" "No," Frank said. "She is dangerous. I need to look her in the eye." I said, I need to know if there is anything human left in there. Before I go into that courtroom and destroy her, I need to give her one chance to stop. I texted her. I saw the petition. Come over. Frank is out. She arrived 20 minutes later. She looked haggard. The polished veneer was cracking. Her hair wasn't quite as perfect. Her coat had a stain on the lapel. She looked like a woman who was holding a heavy door shut with her shoulder. She walked into the living room and didn't sit down. She stood by the fireplace, clutching her purse. Where is he? She asked. He is at the barber shop. I lied. Frank was in the kitchen, listening. Why did you do it? Mom? I asked. I was sitting on the couch, my boot resting on the ottoman. I didn't yell. I was too tired to yell. Do what? She asked. Feigning ignorance. File for guardianship. Call Frank senile. Call me unstable. Because it is true, she cried. Her voice cracked. Look at this place. Lila, you are sleeping in a guest room. Dad is 81. You are hurt. You are not thinking straight. I am trying to save this family. Save us from what? I asked. From the debts you racked up? From the loan sharks you tried to give Frank's house to? She froze. Her eyes went wide. I know about the second mortgage. I said, I know about the $50,000 of wellness inventory rotting in New Jersey. I know about the forged deed. Marlene's face twisted. It wasn't fear anymore. It was ugly. Naked defensiveness. You have been spying on me, she hissed. I have been protecting myself. I said, and I saw the email to Jim Bram. September 12th. You were planning this before I even got hurt. Marlene paced the room. Her movements were jerky, frantic. You don't understand, she said. You have never understood. I did everything for you. I took out those loans to try and build a business, to build a legacy I could leave you, and it failed, okay? It failed, and now I am drowning, and you are sitting here with your grandfather, judging me. You tried to steal his house. Mom, I was going to pay it back, she screamed. Once the business turned around, or once the settlement came through. The settlement, my leg, my pain. It was just a line item in her repayment plan. Is that all I am to you? I asked quietly. Collateral? Marlene stopped pacing. She looked at me. Her eyes were wet, but they were cold. The tears were real. But the source wasn't sorrow. It was frustration. You are so selfish, she said. The words hit me like a slap. Selfish? I asked. Yes, selfish. You have always been the golden child. Perfect grades, steady job, perfect little life. You never took a risk. You never tried to build anything big. And now, when I am in trouble, when I need help, you hoard it. You hoard your money. You hoard your trust. You let me sink. She stepped closer. You were always better at being the victim. Lila, even when you were a kid, you fell down. You cried. And everyone came running. Now you get in a car crash. And suddenly you are the martyr. Well, guess what? Real life is hard. Real life is messy. And sometimes you have to do things you don't want to do to survive. She wasn't apologizing. She was justifying. She had rewritten reality so completely that in her mind, she was the hero making the tough calls, and I was the ungrateful daughter refusing to play my part. Get out, I said. Marlene stared at me. She wiped her face. The mask of the loving mother was gone. In its place was something hard and unrecognizable. Fine, she said. See you in court? She walked out. Frank came out of the kitchen. He looked old. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. She is gone, he said. Yeah, I said. I think she has been gone for a long time. The next day, Frank revealed the second part of his one move. We were reviewing the legal strategy with Celine. Marlene's petition for guardianship hinged on the claim that Frank was incompetent. Here is the trap, Frank said. He opened the trust document to page 40. Clause 12b. Competency, challenge protocol. In the event that any party challenges the competency of the grantor, Franklin Hayes, the trustee shall immediately commission an independent. third-party medical evaluation of the grantor. Furthermore, the trustee shall commission a full forensic financial audit of all accounts associated with the grantor and any petitioning parties to determine if undue influence or financial malfeasance has occurred. I read it twice. Any petitioning parties. That means Marlene. I said, exactly. Celine said, a small smile playing on her lips. By filing the petition, she has legally triggered an audit of her own finances. She opened the door, and now the trust is going to walk through it and turn over every rock in her garden. She doesn't know, does she? I asked. Not yet, Frank said. She will find out at the preliminary hearing. And by then, it will be too late to withdraw without prejudice. It was brilliant. It was nuclear. Frank hadn't just protected himself. He had set a snare that used Marlene's own aggression against her. But before I could feel the satisfaction of the trap, another blow landed. It came in the mail. Again. This time, it was a letter from a life insurance company I had never heard of. Term Life Secure. I opened it, expecting another junk offer. Dear policyholder, this is a reminder that your quarterly premium of $48.50 is due on November 1st for policy number 883920. Insured, Lila Hayes. Beneficiary, Marlene Hayes. I stared at the paper. The policy date was June. 4 months ago. I didn't take out life insurance in June. I had a policy through work. I didn't need another one. I called the number on the letterhead. Yes, Ms. Hayes, the representative said. That policy was opened online. Electronic signature. The premiums have been paid from a checking account ending in 4092. That was Marlene's account. And the address on file? I asked. P.O. Box 441, Briar Glen. A P.O. Box. She had hidden the correspondence. I hung up. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped the phone. It wasn't a huge policy. $50,000. Just enough to cover her debts. Just enough to pay off the inventory rotting in New Jersey. She bet on my death. I whispered. Frank took the letter from my hand. He read it. His face went gray. She took out a policy on her daughter, he said, and then she asked a lawyer how to fast-track control if you had an accident. We weren't just dealing with fraud anymore. We were dealing with a woman who had monetized my mortality. She had placed a wager on my life, and when the car crash happened, whether she caused it or just capitalized on it, she must have felt a flicker of disappointment that I survived, because if I had died, her problems would have been solved. The realization broke something inside me. It wasn't my heart. That had been broken weeks ago. It was my hesitation. I had been worried about looking like a bitter daughter. I had been worried about what Mrs. Higgins at the drugstore would think. I had been worried about ruining Marlene's reputation. But Marlene had priced my life at $50,000. I looked at Frank. I am done. I said, Done with what? He asked. I am done being sad. I am done hoping she will change. I want to destroy her argument. I want to expose everything. The policy, the forgery, the loans, everything. Celine looked at me. It will be ugly. Lila. It will be public. I don't care. I said. I picked up the life insurance letter. She told me I was better at being the victim. I said, well, she is about to find out how good I am at being a witness. The days leading up to the hearing were a blur of preparation. I stopped sleeping. I spent my nights going through bank statements, highlighting every suspicious transfer. I pulled my medical records. I pulled my phone logs. I built a timeline that was bulletproof. Frank was doing the same. He went to his doctor for a voluntary cognitive assessment. He scored a 29 out of 30. Missed 1 point because I couldn't remember the word for abacus, he grumbled. Who uses an abacus anymore? We were ready, but the emotional toll was heavy. I felt hollowed out. I looked at photos of me and Marlene from 5 years ago, a trip to the coast, smiling in the wind, and I couldn't reconcile that woman with the one who had taken out a policy on my life. Was it always there? Was the love always conditional? Or had the debt eaten her soul slowly, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but hunger? I didn't know. and I realized I had to stop trying to figure it out. Understanding her wasn't my job anymore. Stopping her was. The morning of the hearing arrived. It was raining again. A gray, relentless drizzle that matched the color of the courthouse steps. I dressed carefully, a navy blazer, dark slacks that fit over my boot. I wanted to look serious. I wanted to look capable. Frank wore his best suit, a charcoal wool that smelled of cedar. He looked dignified, but frail. The stress was eating him too. We met Celine in the lobby. She looked fierce in a red scarf. "Ready?" she asked. "As I'll ever be," I said. We walked toward the courtroom doors. And there she was. Marlene was standing near the metal detectors. She was surrounded by a small entourage, 2 women from her church group, looking solemn and supportive, and a lawyer I didn't recognize, a young man who looked like he was trying too hard. She saw us. Her eyes locked onto mine. She didn't look guilty. She looked righteous. She had convinced herself that she was the victim here, that she was the loving mother forced to take drastic measures to save her stubborn father and broken daughter. She gave me a sad, pitying smile. I didn't smile back. I touched the pocket of my blazer, where the copy of the life insurance letter sat folded against my heart. "You have no idea." I thought. We walked past her, into the courtroom. The air smelled of old wood and floor polish. I took my seat next to Frank. I laid my hands on the table. They were steady. The judge entered. "All rise." I stood up, putting my weight on my good leg. I felt the pain in my fracture. Sharp and grounding. It was a reminder. I was broken. Yes, but I was still standing. And today, I was going to make sure everyone knew exactly who broke me. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and old anxiety. It was a smell that stuck to the back of my throat, metallic and sour. I sat at the defendant's table next to Frank. My hands clasped tightly in my lap to stop them from trembling. My leg, encased in the walking boot, throbbed with a dull, insistent rhythm that seemed to sync with the ticking of the wall clock. I felt small. I felt exposed. Despite the blazer I had worn to look professional, I felt like a child wearing her mother's clothes. I was still limping. I was still tired in a way that sleep could not fix. I looked at the gallery behind us. Marlene was there. She looked impeccable. She was wearing a cream-colored suit that suggested innocence and moral purity. Her hair was swept back in a soft chignon. Flanking her were 2 women I recognized from her prayer circle. Ladies who had known me since I was in pigtails, now looking at me with expressions of tragic disappointment. They patted Marlene's hand. They whispered to her. They were part of the theater she had constructed, the Greek chorus to her tragedy. She is good. I thought, feeling a sick churn in my stomach. She looks like the worried daughter. She looks like the victim. Beside me, Frank was a statue. He wore his charcoal suit, his spine pressed against the back of the wooden chair. He did not look at Marlene. He looked straight ahead at the empty bench, his jaw set in a line of granite. He was 81 years old, and his own daughter had dragged him here to tell the world his mind was gone. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. We stood. The pain in my knee flared, sharp and grounding. I grabbed the edge of the table for support. Judge Eleanor Vance swept in. She was a woman of 60 with a reputation for suffering no fools. She sat down, adjusted her glasses, and looked at the docket. "We are here for the preliminary hearing on the matter of the Hayes guardianship petition," she said. Her voice was dry, devoid of emotion. Marlene's attorney stood up. He was a man named Mr. Dalloway, smooth-faced and eager. "Your Honor," he began, his voice dripping with practiced concern. "We are here because my client, Ms. Hayes, is deeply worried about her father's safety. We have affidavits suggesting memory loss, financial erraticism, and a vulnerability to undue influence. We are simply asking for temporary authority to ensure Mr. Hayes and his injured granddaughter are protected while a full assessment is conducted." He gestured to me as if I were a prop. His injured granddaughter. Celine Ward stood up. She did not use flowery language. She did not use gestures. "Your Honor," she said, "we move to dismiss the petition with prejudice. Mr. Hayes is competent, independent, and currently under the protection of an irrevocable trust administered by a third-party fiduciary. Furthermore, we have evidence that this petition is not motivated by concern, but by a desperate attempt to conceal financial malfeasance. Mr. Dalloway chuckled, a condescending sound. Malfeasance? That is a strong word for a family dispute. Celine picked up a file from our table. She walked to the bench. I would like to enter into evidence Exhibit A, she said. A deed transfer application submitted 3 weeks ago to the county clerk. It attempts to transfer ownership of Mr. Hayes's primary residence to a holding company controlled by a private lender. The signature on the grantor line purports to be Franklin Hayes. She handed the paper to the bailiff, who handed it to the judge. Mr. Hayes did not sign this. Celine continued. He was not even in the county on the date it was signed. He was fishing at Lake Miller with his neighbor. We have the campground receipts. Judge Vance looked at the document. She looked at the signature. Then she looked at Marlene. Marlene did not flinch. She maintained her expression of sorrowful concern, though I saw her hand tighten around her purse strap until the knuckles turned white. Mr. Dalloway jumped up. Your Honor, this is the first we are hearing of this. I am sure this is simply a clerical confusion. Perhaps a draft document was filed in error during an attempt to refinance for home improvements? Clerical confusion, Celine repeated flatly. Does a clerical error typically involve forging a signature and notarizing it with a stamp from a notary who has been dead for 2 years? A ripple of sound went through the courtroom. Someone in the back coughed. The judge looked over her glasses at Mr. Dalloway. Dead for 2 years? She asked. We are verifying the notary's status. Celine said, but the stamp is dated from a commission that expired 4 years ago. Judge Vance set the paper down. Her face had changed. The boredom was gone, replaced by a sharp, predatory attention. This court takes allegations of fraud very seriously. Mr. Dalloway. The judge said. She turned to Frank. Mr. Hayes, she said, do you understand where you are? Yes, Your Honor, Frank said. His voice was clear. I am in the Briar Glen County Courthouse. It is Tuesday, and I am here because my daughter would rather have me declared incompetent than admit she tried to steal my house. The judge nodded slowly. Under the circumstances, she said, I am not granting temporary guardianship today. However, given the serious nature of the allegations on both sides, competence versus fraud, I am ordering the independent evaluation protocols outlined in the trust to proceed immediately. She looked at Marlene. And that includes the financial audit. Ms. Hayes, if you are petitioning for control of this estate, the court needs to know exactly why. We will reconvene in 10 days. She banged the gavel. Marlene stood up quickly. She did not look at us. She whispered something to her lawyer, turned on her heel, and marched out, her church ladies trailing behind her like a flock of confused geese. I let out a breath I'd been holding for 20 minutes. We survived round 1. Celine said, packing her briefcase. Frank did not smile. He looked at the door where Marlene had exited. She is cornered, he said softly, and a cornered animal is the most dangerous thing in the woods. The audit began the next morning. Mr. Henderson, the fiduciary, had hired a forensic accountant named Sarah. She set up shop in Frank's dining room, surrounded by boxes of bank statements and a laptop that hummed like a beehive. I sat with her, drinking coffee, watching her work. It felt intrusive, having a stranger comb through the family finances, but it was necessary. It did not take her long to find the bleeding. Lila, Sarah said around 11 o'clock, can you look at this? I walked over to the table. She pointed to a spreadsheet on her screen. These are transfers from a joint checking account Frank had with your grandmother. She said, Marlene was never removed as a signatory after your grandmother passed. It was a dormancy oversight. I looked at the numbers. August 4th, $2,000. August 15th, $1,500. September 1st, $3,000. The payee was listed as Kite Key Consulting. Who is Kite and Key? I asked. I looked them up. Sarah said, it is a Shell LLC registered in Delaware. The mailing address redirects to a P.O. box in Trenton. But look at the memo lines on the checks: consulting services, brand management, logistics. Frank does not need brand management. I said, he is a retired carpenter. Sarah clicked a few keys. I cross-referenced the EIN of the company. It is linked to a tax filing for Lumina Wellness. My stomach dropped. Lumina, the failed essential oil scheme. She was funneling Frank's money into her failed business, I said, and she was labeling it as consulting to hide it. There is more, Sarah said. She pulled up another screen. There are no invoices, no contracts, no receipts, just money going out. Over the last 18 months, she has drained nearly $40,000 from this account. It was small enough amounts that the bank did not flag it, but frequent enough to bleed it dry. $40,000. That was Frank's cushion. That was the money for his roof repairs, his medical deductibles, his comfort. She had stolen it, dollar by dollar, while bringing him donuts on Sundays. I felt a surge of rage so pure it made my visions swim. It was not just the theft, it was the intimacy of it. She had sat at this very table, drinking his coffee, smiling at him, knowing she was robbing him blind. I need to tell him, I said. Sarah nodded. He needs to know. But Lila, this gives us the leverage. If she proceeds with the competency hearing, this evidence goes into the public record. She will not just lose the case, she could go to prison. I walked into the living room. Frank was sitting in his armchair, staring out the window at the rain. Grandpa, I said. He turned. He saw my face. He saw the paper in my hand. How much? He asked. 40,000, I said. He closed his eyes. He did not look surprised. He looked defeated. I knew the balance was dropping. He said softly, I thought maybe I was forgetting things. I thought maybe I had spent it and didn't remember. That is why I didn't say anything at first. I was scared she was right. I was scared I was losing my mind. That is what she wanted, I said, kneeling beside his chair. She gaslighted you. She made you doubt yourself so you wouldn't doubt her. Frank reached out and took my hand. His skin was paper thin, dry and cool. She is my daughter. Lila, he whispered. I held her when she was an hour old. How do you reconcile that? How do you look at a baby and imagine she will grow up to steal your savings? You don't. I said, you can't. We sat there in silence, mourning a person who was still alive but lost to us completely. That afternoon, the doorbell rang. It was Mr. Greaves. He was wearing a raincoat that dripped onto the porch. He held a USB drive in his hand. I have the footage, he said. We gathered around the television in the living room. Celine had come over. Sensing the momentum shifting, Frank sat in his chair. I stood, too anxious to sit. Mr. Greaves plugged the drive into the side of the TV. This is from a security camera at a warehouse distribution center about 300 yards from the underpass. He said, it is a wide angle, so the quality is grainy, but it catches the approach to the intersection. He pressed play. The screen showed the gray, rainy street. It was dark, illuminated by streetlights and the headlights of passing cars. The timestamp read 1742. There, Mr. Greaves said. Pointing, I saw my car, the silver sedan. I was moving slowly, cautiously in the rain. Then I saw the other car. It was a dark shape, moving fast, too fast. It was right on my bumper. As my brake lights flared for the intersection, the dark car did not slow down. But that was not the shocking part. Just before impact, a split second before the collision, the dark car swerved. It was a sharp, deliberate jerk of the wheel to the left. The front passenger side of the dark sedan slammed into the rear driver's side of my car. It wasn't a rear-end collision. Mr. Greaves said, it was a pit maneuver. A pit maneuver. The kind police use to spin out fleeing suspects. They hit you at the precise angle to cause maximum loss of control. Mr. Greaves said, if they had hit you dead center, you would have just been shunted forward by hitting the corner. They sent you spinning into the truck ahead. I felt the blood drain from my face. It wasn't an accident, I whispered. It was an attack. Mr. Greaves paused the video. I ran the plates. He said, "It took some doing." The glare from the headlights obscured them in the first few frames, but I got a clear shot from a frame just before the swerve. He clicked a button. A zoomed-in image appeared. JKL 492. "The car is registered to a man named Raymond Malloy." "Mr.?" Greaves said. "Who is Raymond Malloy?" Frank asked. I stared at the name. It sounded vaguely familiar, like a song heard once on the radio years ago. "Mr. Greaves pulled out a file. "Raymond Malloy is a former loan officer. He currently works as a consultant for high-risk borrowers. He has a record for assault and insurance fraud. And, Mr. Greaves added, looking at me, he dated your mother for 3 months last winter." The air left the room. Marlene dated him? I said, "She never mentioned a Raymond. She wouldn't." Mr. Greaves said, "It was during the height of her debt crisis. He wasn't just a boyfriend. Lila, he was likely her creditor, or her fix." I sat down on the coffee table, my legs giving out, the pieces slammed together, the debt, the need for cash, the email asking about incapacitation, and then a man she knew, a man with a history of violence and fraud, ramming my car off the road. She hired him. I said, my voice sounded hollow. "She hired him to hurt me, or to scare you," Frank said, "to cause an accident that would force you to need help. She didn't know he would hit you that hard, or maybe she didn't care. She took out a life insurance policy," I reminded him. "She bet against me. If Ray Malloy hit me too hard and I died, she got $50,000. If I lived, she got control of my settlement. It was a win-win for her." "Lila," Celine said, her voice sharp, "this changes everything. This isn't civil court anymore. This is attempted murder, or at the very least, conspiracy to commit assault." I looked at the screen, the dark car, swerving, the violence of it, the intention. My mother did this. The thought was a physical weight, a stone in my chest that made it hard to breathe. I thought about all the times I had defended her to my friends. She is just intense. She tries hard. She loves me in her own way. It was all a lie. She didn't love me. She viewed me as an asset, a resource to be mined, and when the resource became difficult, she authorized an extraction. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. I wiped it away angrily. "We need to give this to the police." Celine said, "No." I said, "Not yet." "Why?" Frank asked. "Because if we give it to them now," she lawyers up. "She claims she didn't know what Ray was going to do. She claims he was a stalker. She spins it." I stood up. "I want her to admit it." I said, "I want her to look me in the eye and tell me she didn't do it." That night, the house was quiet. But it wasn't peaceful. The silence felt charged, like the air before a lightning strike. I couldn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen, drinking tea, staring at the rain against the window. Frank walked in. He was wearing his bathrobe. He sat down across from me. "You are thinking about the car," he said. "I am thinking about everything." I said, "I am thinking about how I used to make her Mother's Day cards. I am thinking about how she nursed me through the chicken pox. Was any of it real?" "It was real then." Frank said, "People change, Lila. Desperation changes them. Shame changes them." She dug a hole, and the deeper she got, the darker it got. She stopped seeing us as people and started seeing us as ladders. He reached into the pocket of his robe. He pulled out a small digital recorder. "I didn't want to show you this," he said. "I thought it would hurt you too much. But after today, after the video, you need to know the whole truth." He placed the recorder on the table. "I have been recording her for 4 months. He said, ever since she first brought up the deed transfer." He pressed play. The audio was clear. It was recorded in this very kitchen. "Dad, just sign the paper. You are being so stubborn. It is just a formality. If you don't sign it, the bank is going to take everything." "I am not signing over my house." "Marlene, why is the bank coming for you?" "Because I borrowed against it. Okay? I borrowed against the inheritance, and if I don't pay them, they are going to come after me." Do you want your daughter on the street? You borrowed against something you don't own yet? You spent my death before I died? Don't be dramatic. You are 81. It is going to happen eventually. I needed the liquidity now. Why can't you just help me? Why do you have to make everything so hard? The recording clicked off. You spent my death before I died. Frank looked at me. She has been waiting for me to die, he said, and when I didn't die fast enough, and you got hurt. She decided to pivot. She is a monster. I whispered. No, Frank said. She is an addict. She is addicted to a lifestyle she can't afford and an image she can't maintain, and she sacrificed us to feed it. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Marlene. I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered over the decline button. But then I remembered the video. I remembered the swerve. I answered. Hello, Mother. Leela, she said. Her voice was brittle, high-pitched. We need to talk, not in court. Just us. Why? I asked. Because this is getting out of hand, she said. The lawyers. They are going to eat up all the money. There will be nothing left for anyone. I have a proposal. A proposal? Where? I asked. The park, she said. By the river, where we used to have picnics. 30 minutes. I hung up. I am going. I told Frank, I am coming with you. He said, no. I said, she won't talk if you are there. I will have my phone. I will record it. But I need to do this alone. Tara drove me. She waited in the car, the engine running, her eyes scanning the parking lot like a bodyguard. I walked to the bench by the river. The water was gray and swollen from the rain. Marlene was waiting. She was wearing a trench coat, collar turned up. She looked small. I sat down on the other end of the bench, resting my crutches against the wood. What is the proposal? I asked. Marlene didn't look at me. She watched the water. I will drop the petition, she said. I will tell the court I made a mistake. I will withdraw the guardianship claim. And, I asked, and you convince Frank to dissolve the trust. She said, he goes back to the old will, the one where I am the executor. I almost laughed. It was a dark, jagged sound. You want us to dissolve the trust so the audit stops. I said. Marlene flinched. I just want peace. Lila, she snapped. I want us to be a family again. If that audit continues, they are going to dig up things that don't need to be dug up. Misunderstandings, like Ray Malloy? I asked. Marlene went still, absolutely still. I know who he is. Mom, I said, I know you dated him, and I know he is the one who hit my car. She turned to face me slowly. Her face was a mask of terror. I didn't tell him to hit you. She whispered, I swear. Lila, I told him I needed you to be distracted. I told him I needed a situation where I could step in. He said he would handle it. I didn't know he was going to ram you. Distracted, I repeated. You wanted me distracted so you could steal my identity, so you could sign the papers while I was on painkillers. I did it for us, she cried. I needed the money to pay him off. Ray was threatening me. Lila, he said he would hurt you if I didn't pay him. So I thought, if I can get control of the settlement, I can pay him, and everyone is safe. I stared at her. The twisted logic was breathtaking. She had hired a thug to cause an accident so she could steal my settlement money to pay off the thug she had hired. It was a snake eating its own tail. And I was just the meal in the middle. You are lying. I said, you didn't do it to protect me. You did it to save your own skin. You took out life insurance on me. Mom, in June, Ray wasn't threatening you in June. You were planning this. Marlene's face crumpled. She started to cry. But it wasn't the pretty, cinematic crying she did in public. It was ugly, snotty, gasping sobs. Please, Lila, she begged. She reached for my hand. I pulled it away. Please, if the audit finds the payments to Ray, if they find the deed, I will go to jail. Do you want your mother in jail? I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had given me life, and then tried to sell it for $50,000. I realized then that I wasn't afraid of her anymore. And I didn't hate her. I just felt a profound, aching pity. She was a hollow shell, filled with lies and debt. "I am not stopping the audit," I said. "Lila, please, I am not stopping it," I repeated, my voice steady. "You made your choices. You chose Ray. You chose the loans. You chose to betray Frank. And now you have to live with the result." Marlene's face hardened. The tears stopped instantly. The shift was terrifying. "You ungrateful little brat," she hissed. "After everything I sacrificed for you." I stood up. I grabbed my crutches. "I am not negotiating. Mother," I said, "I am not trading the truth for your comfort. Not anymore." I turned to walk away. "You will regret this," she screamed after me. "You will destroy this family." I didn't look back. The family was already destroyed. I thought as I walked toward Tara's car. She destroyed it the moment she signed my name to a document I never saw. I got into the car. "Did she confess?" Tara asked. "She confirmed it." I said. "She admitted she knew Ray. She admitted she set it up." I pulled out my phone. The recording app was still running. I stopped it and saved the file. "What now?" Tara asked. "Now we finish it," I said. I looked out the window as we drove away. The rain was stopping. The clouds were breaking apart, revealing a sliver of pale, cold blue sky. I felt lighter. The burden of hoping for her to be a good mother was gone. I didn't have a mother anymore. I had an adversary, and for the first time since the headlights appeared in my rearview mirror, I knew exactly how to drive. "I am ready for the final hearing," I said, and I meant it. The air in courtroom 4B was not just stale, it was pressurized. It felt as though the oxygen had been sucked out and replaced with a volatile gas, something that would ignite with the smallest spark. I sat at the defendant's table, my hands resting flat on the scarred mahogany surface, trying to ground myself. To my left, Frank sat like a stone monument, his breathing shallow but steady. To my right, Celine Ward was arranging her files with the terrifying precision of a surgeon laying out scalpels. Across the aisle, Marlene sat surrounded by her constructed reality. She wore a soft gray cardigan today, something modest and grandmotherly, a stark contrast to the sharp edges of her ambition. Her attorney, Mr. Dalloway, was whispering to her, likely reassuring her that the narrative was still under control. They were banking on a simple story. Frank was a confused old man. I was a manipulated, brain-damaged daughter, and Marlene was the only adult in the room capable of steering the ship. But they did not know about the video. They did not know about the recording. They did not know that we weren't here to defend ourselves. We were here to dismantle her. The bailiff called the room to order. Judge Vance entered, her black robe billowing slightly. She looked tired. She had reviewed the preliminary filings, and the look she cast toward the plaintiff's table was not one of sympathy, it was one of skepticism. "Let us proceed," Judge Vance said. "We are here to review the findings of the court-ordered independent evaluation regarding the competency of Franklin Hayes and the subsequent financial audit triggered by the trust protocols." Mr. Dalloway stood up. "Your Honor, we are confident that the medical professionals will confirm Miss Hayes's deepest fears regarding her father's decline." "Sit down. Mr. Dalloway," the judge said calmly. "Let us hear from the evaluator." Dr. Aris was called to the stand. He was a neurologist with 30 years of experience, a man who spoke in precise, clipped sentences. He adjusted the microphone and looked at his notes. "Dr. Aris," Celine asked, standing at the podium, "you conducted a full cognitive battery on Mr. Hayes 3 days ago. What were your findings?" Dr. Aris looked at Frank, then at the judge. "Mr. Hayes scored a 29 out of 30 on the Montreal Cognitive Assessment," he said. "He demonstrated excellent short-term recall, complex problem-solving abilities, and full orientation to time and place. The only point he missed was naming a specific geometric shape, which he called a rhombus instead of a diamond." A small titter of laughter ran through the gallery. Frank allowed himself a small, dry smile. "In your professional opinion," Celine continued, Is there any evidence of dementia, Alzheimer's, or cognitive decline that would render him unable to manage his affairs? None whatsoever. Doctor, Aris said firmly. In fact, his cognitive reserve is higher than average for a man of 81. He is fully competent. Celine nodded. Thank you. Doctor. She turned to Marlene's table. Mr. Dalloway looked deflated. He didn't even bother to cross-examine. The foundation of their petition, that Frank was senile, had just been pulverized. But we weren't done, Your Honor. Celine said, We moved to the financial audit. Sarah, the forensic accountant, took the stand. She was less clinical than the doctor. She looked angry. She had spent a week digging through the wreckage of Frank's accounts, and what she had found offended her professional sensibilities. Ms. Unit, Celine said, you audited the accounts associated with Mr. Hayes and the petitioner, Marlene Hayes. Did you find irregularities? I found systemic theft, Sarah said. Mr. Dalloway jumped up. Objection. Conclusion. Sustained, the judge said. Though she leaned forward, rephrase, Ms. Ward. Did you find unauthorized transfers? Celine asked. Yes, Sarah said. I identified 42 separate transfers over a period of 18 months from a joint account Mr. Hayes held with his late wife. The total amount is $41,200. The funds were moved to a shell company called Kite and Key Consulting. And who owns Kite and Key Consulting? Celine asked. Sarah held up a document. The registered agent is Marlene Hayes. The tax ID matches a defunct entity known as Lumina Wellness. And were there invoices for these services? No. Contracts? No. Sarah paused, then added, I also found a recent application for a secured loan using Mr. Hayes' primary residence as collateral. The signature on the deed transfer was dated October 3rd. On that date, Mr. Hayes was on a fishing trip in a different county. The courtroom was silent. The only sound was the scratching of the court reporter's machine. Marlene was staring at the table. She was not crying yet. She was calculating. I could see her eyes darting back and forth, looking for an exit, looking for a spin. Celine walked back to our table. She picked up the USB drive containing the audio files. Your Honor, Celine said, the defense would like to introduce Exhibit C. These are audio recordings made by Mr. Hayes in his own home, documenting the pressure he was placed under prior to these transfers. Mr. Dalloway objected again. Entrapment. Privacy violation. Mr. Hayes was recording in his own kitchen. Judge Vance ruled, overruled. Play it. Celine plugged the drive into the AV system. Frank's voice filled the room, sounding weary but firm. You borrowed against something you don't own yet? You spent my death before I died? Then Marlene's voice, shrill and desperate. Don't be dramatic. You are 81. It is going to happen eventually. The gallery gasped. The church ladies behind Marlene shifted in their seats, pulling away from her as if she were contagious. But Celine let it play on. She skipped to a second track, a recording from 2 weeks ago, just after my accident. Dad, we have to act. Lila's accident. It forced the family to act. We can't just wait around anymore. I need the authority to stabilize things. Celine paused the recording. Forced the family to act. Celine repeated, not the accident was a tragedy, not, we need to help Lila, but the accident forced us to act. It implies that the accident was a catalyst for a plan that was already in motion. Marlene stood up. That is out of context, she shouted. Her voice cracked. I meant that the medical bills were piling up. Sit down. Ms. Hayes, Judge Vance barked. Her gavel slammed down like a gunshot. Marlene sank back into her chair. Her face was red, blotchy. The cool, gray grandmother facade was melting. Now, Celine said, her voice dropping an octave, we come to the most disturbing piece of evidence. The defense introduces the security footage from the Briar Glen Warehouse District, taken on the evening of October 14th. She played the video. The large screens on the wall flickered to life. The grainy gray rain, my silver car, and then the dark sedan. We watched in silence as the dark car shadowed me. We watched it mirror my lane changes, and then we watched the swerve. The deliberate, aggressive pit maneuver that sent my car spinning into the truck. It didn't look like an accident. It looked like an execution. Celine froze the frame on the license plate. The vehicle is registered to Raymond Malloy. She said, a man with a criminal record for fraud and assault. A man who, according to phone records we subpoenaed yesterday, exchanged 24 text messages with the petitioner, Marlene Hayes. In the week leading up to the crash, the silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of people realizing they were in the presence of something evil. Marlene was shaking. Her hands were covering her mouth. Celine turned to the judge. We are not just looking at financial exploitation. Your Honor, we are looking at a pattern of behavior that suggests Ms. Hayes orchestrated, or at least facilitated, a dangerous event to incapacitate her daughter and seize control of this estate. Mr. Dalloway looked at Marlene. He moved his chair slightly away from her. I call Marlene Hayes to the stand. Celine said. Marlene walked to the witness box. She looked small. She looked terrified. But as she sat down, I saw a flicker of that old defiance. She still thought she could talk her way out of this. She still thought she was the protagonist. Ms. Hayes, Celine began. Did you know Raymond Malloy? Marlene took a deep breath. I knew him briefly. We dated for a few months. Did you discuss your financial troubles with him? I might have mentioned them. Everyone has troubles. Did you tell him that you needed your father or your daughter to be incapacitated so you could access the estate funds? No, Marlene cried. I never said that. I just told him I was stressed. I told him I needed a miracle. A miracle, Celine said flatly. Is that what you call a car crash? It was an accident, Marlene insisted. Ray is a loose cannon. If he did that, he did it on his own. He was trying to be a hero. He thought if he created a situation where I could step in, I would be grateful. But I didn't ask him to. You didn't ask him, Celine said. But you did prepare for it. You emailed your lawyer about fast-tracking power of attorney a month before it happened. I was being proactive, Marlene screamed. And the life insurance? Celine asked. The $50,000 policy you took out on Lila in June? Was that proactive too? Marlene froze. Her mouth opened, then closed. You hoped she would die. Celine said, it wasn't a question. It was a statement. You bet against your daughter's life. Marlene broke. I did it for them, she shrieked. She stood up in the witness box, gripping the railing. You don't understand. I was drowning. The loans, the interest, they were going to kill me. I tried to build a business. I tried to make something of myself so I could leave a legacy for Lila. And it all fell apart. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I just needed the money to stop. She looked at me. Her eyes were wild. Lila, tell them. Tell them I love you. I was going to pay it back. I swear. Once the settlement came through, I was going to pay off the house. I was going to fix everything. I am your mother. I am the one who took care of you. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had traced my signature. The woman who had sent a thug to run me off the road. You didn't take care of me, I said quietly. My voice carried in the silent room. You tried to liquidate me. Marlene sobbed. It was a jagged, ugly sound. She slumped back into the chair, burying her face in her hands. No further questions. Celine said. Judge Vance looked at Marlene with an expression of profound distaste. You may step down, the judge said. But do not leave this building. Marlene stumbled back to her table. She sat down and put her head on the wood. Her attorney was looking at his phone, ignoring her completely. Frank touched my arm. I want to speak, he said. Celine looked at the judge. Your Honor, the respondent would like to address the court. Judge Vance nodded. Go ahead. Mr. Hayes, you can speak from there. Frank didn't stand up. He couldn't. The day had drained him, but he sat up straight, his hands folded over the head of his cane. Your Honor, he said. His voice was raspy, but it filled the room. I have lived in Briar Glen for 81 years, he said. I built the house my daughter is trying to steal. I built the table she sat at while she planned how to rob me. He paused, looking at Marlene's hunched form. We like to think that monsters are strangers, Frank said. We like to think they are people hiding in the bushes. But usually, the people who hurt us the most are the ones who have the keys to our house. He looked at me. I created this trust, my one move. Not because I wanted to hoard my money. I did it because I realized that my daughter had become a predator. And when you are dealing with a predator, you cannot rely on love. You have to rely on law. I did it to protect Lila, because Lila is the only thing in this family worth saving. He turned back to the judge. My daughter is sick, Your Honor. Greed is a sickness, but it is a sickness that has victims, and I am done being one of them. Frank stopped speaking. He lowered his head. Judge Vance stared at him for a long moment. Then she gathered her papers. This court has heard enough, she said. She removed her glasses. The petition for guardianship is denied with prejudice, she ruled. Marlene Hayes, you are stripped of any and all legal authority regarding Franklin Hayes and Lila Hayes. She looked at the bailiff. Furthermore, given the testimony regarding forgery, fraud, and the video evidence linking the petitioner to a vehicular assault, I am referring this entire file to the district attorney's office for immediate criminal investigation. Marlene let out a wail. Court is in recess, Judge Vance said. She banged the gavel. And bailiff? Ensure Ms. Hayes does not leave until the officers arrive. The room erupted into chaos. The church ladies scrambled away from Marlene as if she were on fire. Marlene was sobbing, shouting at her lawyer, who was packing his briefcase with deliberate speed. I didn't look at her. I couldn't. Come on, Frank said. Let's go home. We walked out into the hallway. The marble floors echoed with the sound of my walking boot and Frank's cane. Thump, click, thump, click. The hallway was long and empty, bathed in the cold light of the afternoon sun. Frank stopped near the elevator. He leaned heavily against the wall. His face was gray, the adrenaline of the fight finally leaving his body. Grandpa? I asked, reaching for him. I am okay, he wheezed. I am just tired. Lila. God. I am tired. He looked at me. His blue eyes were watery. We did it. I said, she can't hurt us anymore. No, he said, she can't. He reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket. His hand was shaking. He pulled out a white envelope. It was sealed with wax, old-fashioned and heavy. I told you there was one more letter, he said. I looked at the envelope. For Lila. To be opened when the dust settles. What is this? I asked. Frank smiled. It was a sad, weary smile. The trust protects the assets, he said. But this protects the future. He pressed it into my hand. I added a clause yesterday. He said, the house? It doesn't go to the trust anymore. It goes to you, immediately. And the rental property on the south side? I sold it this morning. The check is in there. You sold the rental? I asked. It is enough to pay off your medical bills, Frank said. And enough to buy you a new car, a safe car. Grandpa. I started to cry. And there is one more thing in there. He said, a name. A name? The name of a man in the city. Frank said, he is a friend of mine from the old days. He runs a logistics firm, a big one. I sent him your resume. He wants to meet you on Monday. He gripped my hand. His fingers were strong, despite his frailty. You are not going back to that office in Briar Glen. Lila, you are not going to stay in this town where everyone knows your business. You are going to take the money. You are going to take the job. And you are going to build a life that is so big and so full that Marlene Hayes becomes nothing more than a footnote in your biography. I stared at him. He hadn't just fought for my safety. He had fought for my freedom. But what about you? I asked. I can't leave you. Frank straightened up. He adjusted his hat. I have the trust, he said. I have Mr. Henderson. And I have the satisfaction of knowing I beat her. That is enough company for an old man. He pushed the elevator button. Besides, he said, his eyes twinkling for the first time in months, you are going to visit, and you are going to bring me those fancy donuts from the city. The elevator doors opened. I looked at the envelope in my hand. It felt heavy. It felt like a key. I looked back at the courtroom doors. I could hear Marlene's voice, muffled and hysterical, arguing with the police. She was a ghost now, a loud, angry ghost, but a ghost nonetheless. I looked at Frank, my grandfather, my savior. "Okay," I said. We stepped into the elevator. The doors closed, sealing out the noise, sealing out the betrayal, and carrying us up, toward the street, toward the rain-washed air, and toward whatever came next. Thank you so much for listening to My Mother Abandoned Us After My Car Accident. Grandpa's one move changed everything. This story was a journey through betrayal, justice, and the lengths a family will go to protect, or destroy, each other. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Please drop a comment below with your country or city. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you enjoyed seeing Lila and Frank take down Marlene, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new episode. What would you have done if you were in Lila's shoes? Would you have forgiven Marlene? Or did she get exactly what she deserved? Share your thoughts in the comments in English. I read every single one. Until next time, stay safe and watch your back.